So the unit, local unit that is, recouping some of its losses by the end of last week, touching the 840 mark. We've seen a little bit of weakness creep through this morning. What are you making of the kind of activity we're seeing on the dollar rand right now?
Morning, Alishia. Welcome back. Good to see you again. As far as dollar rand's concerned, you're absolutely right. Did stage a bit of recovery last week, I think largely based on comments that Bernanke made at his Jackson Hole speech. Although, he didn't go as far as to announce QE3, there's an expected start date. It does seem that his comments, particularly alluding to a very weak labour market, has revived market hopes that QE3 will be launched very soon. And this, of course, has led to quite a risk on vibe this morning. So on the day, the rand, one of the top performers certainly amongst EM currencies and also amongst commodity currencies, so rallying quite strongly. And at this point, it really does seem to be much more of a risk-on mood that's driving a rally in risk assets. And of course, that would be largely correlated with weakness in the dollar at this point.
Of course, when you're looking at the kind of movement that we did see on Friday, you've got to ask the question, is it more a case of a dollar weakness as opposed to rand strength, specifically considering some of the issues that we've still got to contend with locally? We've got the ongoing unrest in the mining sector, and that impacting exchange inflows into the country on the one hand, and of course then abroad, Chinese PMI data coming through, and that's still rattling many nerves out there.
Yes, absolutely. So on the one hand, as you mentioned, there have been several factors that have weighed on the rand specifically. I do think that this bounce that we're seeing in the currency has much more to do with dollar weakness than any other factor at the moment. But as you mentioned, we do have those all-important PMI numbers coming out. China's PMI was already disappointed to the downside, and now we're waiting for some other indicators out of leading economic regions like the EU, like the UK, and of course the domestic one as well. And in South Africa's case, the South African PMI is quite highly correlated with the EU PMI correlation. They have about 65%. So we'll certainly be watching that one quite closely, particularly, the leading sub-indicators like new sales orders and expected business conditions to see where the local PMI could be headed. So certainly we don't believe that this strength in the rand is going to be sustained over a great period of time. We're still targeting a year end of about 860. So it could still be a bumpy ride ahead for the local unit.
Certainly it is a big economic week ahead here in South Africa. Bearing that in mind and all that's going on globally, what kind of trading range have you pegged out? Because ahead of the weekend, we had many traders saying that they could see the currency testing the 837 mark ahead of the US holiday today. And on the upside, when we were reaching the 850 mark, many traders saying the local unit was looking pretty toppish. So give us a more near-term forecast when it comes to ranges on the local unit.
Well, as you mentioned, the 837 level, resistance level, is going to be quite important. So if the rand manages to break below that and hold there, then the next level we'd be looking for is about 828. But on the opposite side, the rand could easily test the level of 843, and that then, if it holds above, that could then open the door to 848 and then 855. And I do think that some further depreciation is far more likely than extended rand strength at this point, particularly when you're looking at the PMI numbers that we're getting. So of course today's trading is more likely to be all about PMIs, and given our expectation that it's likely to point to further weakness in both global and domestic manufacturing, I don't think that there's going to be much further impetus for the rand